Now hold it up! You won't get hurt, your buddy's good with guns.
You're crazy, I won't do it.
It's just a game. Go ahead. Collins, hold it closer to you. What's the matter, you scared?
In 1953, an independent film production company called The Filmmakers Incorporated would release the motion picture The Hitchhiker in conjunction with RKO Radio Pictures. 18 years later, in 1971, the rock group The Doors would release the album L.A. Woman, which featured what was arguably their biggest hit single ever, Riders on the Storm. But what connection does this 1953 thriller and 1971 rock classic have in common? Let's delve into the details. But first, your support makes videos like the one you are currently watching possible. If you enjoy this content and wish to see more, you can show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Additionally, you have the option to contribute through a one-time super thanks donation or by becoming a monthly patron supporter. As a patron supporter, you will gain access to exclusive weekly videos that are not available on this channel. Okay, let's dive back in. The Hitchhiker is a 1953 film directed by Ida Lupino. It tells the story of Roy Collins, played by Edmund O'Brien, and Gilbert Brown, played by Frank Lovejoy. Two men who, while on a fishing trip together, unwittingly pick up a hitchhiker named Emmett Myers. Unbeknownst to them, Myers is a deranged killer on the run from the law. He holds both of them at gunpoint and forces them to drive him across the Mexican desert while evading both American and Mexican police. With a running time of only 71 minutes, The Hitchhiker is a tight, tense psychological thriller that is surprisingly much more brutal than most films of the time period that it was made in. And it stands out from other noir films of the period for a number of reasons. First, it is notable for being one of the few Hollywood films of its time to be directed by a woman, Ida Lupino, in what was then a male-dominated industry. Ida Lupino was an English actress who broke into Hollywood during the 1930s before becoming one of the few female directors working in Hollywood in the 1950s. The Hitchhiker is also noteworthy for its realistic and gritty portrayal of violence and the psychological impact of said violence on the characters involved. It deviates from the typical glamorized portrayal of crime in Hollywood films of that era and opts for a more grounded and intense approach. This approach is no doubt due to the fact that the film was made by a company called Filmmakers Incorporated, an independent film production company founded by Lupino and her husband, Collier Young. Operating outside of the Hollywood mainstream allowed Lupino and her team the freedom to explore themes that other major studios couldn't. And while Lupino was required to use fictional names, the movie is based on the true story of serial killer Billy Cook, a man who posed as a hitchhiker and murdered 6 people during a 2-week killing spree back in 1950. Trying to go for as much realism as possible, Ida Lupino interviewed one of Cook's few victims who actually managed to get away. And in addition, she went to San Quentin to interview Billy Cook himself, who was waiting on death row. This research clearly paid off, as the performances by its 3 leads are far more nuanced than was typical of other films in the same genre at this time. William Tolman's creepy performance of Emmett Myers, the stand-in for Billy Cook, feels terrifyingly real, even by the standards of today, not to mention the standards of the 1950s.
You know, you make pretty good targets from where I sit. Anyway, you couldn't tell if I was awake or asleep. Got one bum eye. Won't stay closed. Pretty good, huh?
And the two performances by Edmund O'Brien and Frank Lovejoy as Roy Collins and Gilbert Bowman defy the typical male macho stereotypes normally associated with noir films, as these two men have to find a way to survive the ordeal they are being forced into. And once the movie is done, you walk away knowing that their lives will never be the same. The Hitchhiker also breaks new ground by presenting Mexican characters speaking in their native language, Spanish.
¿Ninguno de los dos que pasaron se parecía a este?
Honradamente no sabemos, señor.
¿Cómo a cuántos kilómetros de aquí lo pasó usted?
Pues verá usted, como a 10 kilómetros.
In an era when Hollywood often resorted to broken English caricatures for Mexican characters, Lupino's film demonstrates a refreshing commitment to authenticity and cultural representation at a time when neither existed in Hollywood. Doing this demonstrated a realism that is common in today's films, but was very uncommon back then. I should also add that The Hitchhiker would not be the only time that the filmmaker's production company would push the boundaries of cinema. In 1950, they would release the film Outrage, directed and co-written by Ida Lupino. It was one of the first post-code films to deal with the subject of rape, and was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Also, The Bigamist in 1953, which was named in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. But with all this said, what does this film have to do with the 70s rock band The Doors? In 1969, Jim Morrison would write, produce, and star in a film entitled Highway, an American Pastoral. In this film, he plays a hitchhiker who commits a highway murder. In his original script, the character he plays is named Billy. While not 100% confirmed, it is widely suspected that the name Billy refers to Billy Cook, the same mass murderer who Ida Lupino interviewed as research for the movie The Hitchhiker. Jim Morrison would revisit the crimes of Billy Cook again for inspiration when he wrote the lyrics for the band's epic track Riders on the Storm. Arguably the Doors' greatest hit single, it would also be the last song on the last Doors album to feature Jim Morrison while he was still alive. I should also mention that Riders on the Storm was also influenced by the philosopher Martin Heidegger and the country music classic Ghost Riders in the Sky. But I did cover all of this, including a breakdown of the song's composition, in a previous video entitled Riders on the Storm, An Exploration into Darkness. I will leave links for this video if you would like to watch a deeper dive into the song Riders on the Storm. Getting back to this video, Jim Morrison would have been a few years shy of 10 when Billy Cook went on his murder spree, and only 10 years old at the time The Hitchhiker was released in theaters. So I have to wonder if he ever saw The Hitchhiker, and if it might have triggered his interest in Billy Cook, and thus him writing the film Highway, an American Pastoral. Or did he come across the story of Billy Cook in some other way, only to use it later as inspiration for the song Riders on the Storm? I also have to wonder if Ida Lupino ever heard the Doors track Riders on the Storm, and was she ever aware of the connection between the song and her movie. Ida Lupino lived to the age of 77 and passed away in 1995, so there is a high likelihood that she might have heard the song at some point in her life. But whether or not she was aware of the song's connection to her 1953 film remains unknown. I don't think I'm going out on too much of a limb here when I say that probably most of you who are watching this video are very familiar with the Doors' classic Riders on the Storm, but you might be less familiar with the film The Hitchhiker. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's available on Blu-ray from Kino Lorber and currently streaming on Amazon Prime. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that the movie The Hitchhiker could have inspired Jim Morrison? Please leave a comment. I'll be anxious to hear what you have to say. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.